Nithyanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrusham Tattvamasyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Satgurum Tam Namami. Nithyanandam, and welcome to this morning's episode of Living Advaita. So how many of you were also watching the beautiful recorded satsang today, filmed in Prayag, where Swamiji was preparing the whole crowd there in the Nithyananda camp for Shahi Snan? If, like us here in Nithyananda Pitam, Bengaluru Adinam, you were tuned in and watching that, I'm sure you also were feeling the excitement, the thrill, maybe a little bit of trepidation about going into that 7-hour-long procession, making your way to Sangam. Of course, Sangam is the place where Yamuna, Ganga, and Saraswati merge. And the next Kumbh Mela, where we're all headed in Ujjain, it's actually the river Shipra. It's not going to be the same Sangam, the same exact place. But even still, if you were watching that discourse, I'm sure you were also feeling like Swamiji is giving this instruction to you personally. How many of you who are Western born, when Swamiji was asking those who were born in the West, if you consider yourselves Hindu, raise your hands? One funny thing, I felt like raising my hand, even though it's kind of obvious because I've taken brahmacharyam. When Swamiji starts talking about something which he himself is excited about, it's really impossible not to catch that same excitement. One very sweet thing about this discourse also is that Swamiji had welcomed Sri Vishwananda Swami. So when Vishwananda is there with Swamiji, it's such a sweet scene. It's like seeing a family reunion, like seeing two old ancient friends catching up. A long time back I had mentioned that I'll start sharing one Kumbh Mela story every day here on the Living Advaita program. One Kumbh Mela story I have to share with you today is something that took place last time, Nasik and Trambakeshwar. A lot of you might know that when I was a seeker, I was actually really intensely seeking for about 3 months before I was led to Swamiji. Maybe this is something I should fill in, give some of the background here. I don't think I've mentioned this on Living Advaita before. The time that I found Swamiji, it was September of 2009. And actually, my life changed very drastically in July of 2009. A 5-year romantic relationship that I had been in from the time I was in 12th grade, a high school sweetheart sort of a relationship. I broke that up. I ended that relationship, decided to become independent, decided to pursue my own goals, my own aspirations. I found out that the guy had been cheating. I mean, it's such ancient history, it doesn't even feel like the same lifetime. It feels like I'm remembering some past life. But in any case, it was in July of 2009 that I suddenly had this aha moment, this realization that I don't have to be stuck in a situation I don't like, that I can take charge, that I can move out, that I can be on my own, that I don't need to be in a relationship, that I can be single. I'm sure this must be resonating with a lot of you. A lot of us have gone through this experience where we go from a codependency to self-sufficiency. In any case, it was that same time, July of that year, when I finally moved out, when I finally had my own place, I started meditating on a daily basis without really knowing what meditation was, what it was going to do. I decided it was just something I had to do. And also around that same time, existence brought me a job that kind of involved giving guidance to others, giving counseling to others. People would come to me in crisis situations, and I had to spontaneously tell them the right thing in order to push them out of whatever slump they were in order to help them. As soon as this started to happen, it was actually a job as a tarot card reader. One of my friends gave me a new deck of cards that featured masters from different world traditions, gods and goddesses from different world religions, Shinto deities from Japan, Tibetan Buddhist masters, beings like Avalokiteshvara, beings like Siddhartha Gautama, even some from the Norse tradition, from the Celtic tradition, from the native North American tradition, Australian Aborigines, basically the entire world, all the different traditions. This deck contained beings from all of them. Somehow, when I was reading through the book that accompanied that deck, one word that kept coming up was enlightenment. And I realized if I'm putting myself in a position to give guidance to other people, to give counseling to other people, I have no right to do it. What business do I have to tell anybody else what's good for them, what's bad for them, what they should pursue, what they should step back on? I realized I have no right doing that unless I'm enlightened. I started intensely praying for enlightenment. I didn't know who to ask. I didn't know where to look. But I knew unless I was enlightened, I wouldn't be able to do as much good in the world as I want to do. So it became something like a daily prayer. I was praying for it. Now, despite the fact that that deck had 44 cards, every single time I shuffled it and pulled a card, whether it was my own reading or if a client was shuffling and pulling their own cards, every single time the very first card turned over was Babaji. And at that time I didn't know who was Mahavatar Babaji. I had never read Autobiography of a Yogi. I had never really researched much about Hindu masters or about the beings who reside in the Himalayas, the enlightened ascended beings. To me, he was just a beautiful artistic rendering on that card, representing what it said was an enlightened master from India. The message on the card was yoga, and the accompanying booklet didn't really give much information beyond that. It explained that yoga is a process of uniting body, mind, and being. So I started doing yoga. Actually, as soon as I realized that his card was coming up first every time, I knew I absolutely had to start doing yoga every day. There was no choice. If Babaji is saying to do it, then I'll do it. Even still, his card kept coming up first. And finally, one night, I was on my way home from work. I realized maybe, because I've started to do the yoga, maybe the reason Babaji keeps coming up anyway, even though I'm taking his advice, maybe he has a deeper message for me than just to do yoga. So that night, I actually Googled the name Babaji to find out who is Babaji. And the website that came up, the first website that came up on Google, it was the first time I saw the word Mahavatar. It said Mahavatar Babaji. When I started reading the print, reading the text on that site, I started to immediately cry. I couldn't hold back the tears because it explained that Mahavatar Babaji appears as a guide to everyone who has a sincere prayer for enlightenment. For me, that was such a pivotal moment because I realized two things. If we pray for enlightenment, we'll get it. The guidance will be there. And also, it proved that existence has its own independent intelligence. That there was no way I could have created that situation. There was no way that I purposely contrived for that card to come up first. I realized this Babaji, he is a true, expressing, independently intelligent being. He's not imaginary. He's not symbolic. He's not representative. He's an actual, conscious individual. And he chose to come through that deck of cards. Now, of course, I understand the same applies for every master, living and who has left the body. The same applies for every deity, every murti. The conscious intelligence behind the murti can fully express through any murti. If you have a picture of Lakshmi, Lakshmi Devi herself can speak to you through that picture. Of course, if you go into a temple where there are deities who have received prana pratishta, the deities can and will respond to you through those murtis. It's literally true. So it was in that moment that I realized Mahavatar Babaji really exists. He's not just an image on a card. He's a true expressing being. And that the prayer for enlightenment was being answered. Towards the end of that website, it said, everyone who has a sincere prayer for enlightenment, Babaji recommends that they chant the Maha Mantra, Om Namah Shivaya, continuously. When I read that word continuously, I knew that that was something I had to take up, because I prayed for enlightenment, because existence brought Babaji to me, or because Babaji came to me, and because this site said Babaji's recommendation is to chant that mantra continuously. I didn't hesitate, I didn't wait, I turned off the computer, turned off my cell phone, unplugged the landline. Back then, people still had landlines. I'm not sure if you guys out there in the world do anymore. Unplugged the landline, locked the door to the apartment, even turned off the light, and just sat down in the middle of my living room floor, put my hands into Chin Mudra, closed my eyes, and started chanting Om Namah Shivaya. Actually, I wasn't even chanting it in a proper voice. I don't know if I was even pronouncing it properly. I was just saying again and again, repetitively, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. I didn't know how to chant properly, so I was speaking it. I don't know how much time went by, but I didn't stop to count how many times I had said it. I wasn't looking at the clock. I was chanting continuously because that's what Babaji had said to do. A couple of days went by like this. When I was on my way to work on the bus or on the SkyTrain, I was in Vancouver, Vancouver's city monorail system. It's called the SkyTrain. So when I was on the train, in my mind I would be chanting it, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, like a thought. When I was by myself, I would be repeating it out loud. If I was at work serving a client, I would be talking to the client, I would interact with the client, I would fulfill my social responsibilities. But as soon as I was alone again, I would go back to the repetition of this beautiful mantra. For a few days, I feel like my state, my consciousness was elevated beyond even what it is now. That intensity of seeking was so strong. Actually, maybe I'll take a sankalpa to start that practice again, but with the mantra Nithyanandoham, the updated mantra, into which we've been initiated as Nithyananda devotees. But in any case, whenever I was just with myself, I was chanting that mantra. And finally, after 2 days of to read it, and that's when I first learned about the Kumbh Mela, while reading Autobiography of a Yogi. Every time a Kumbh Mela is described in that book, Babaji is naturally one primary component. It was at Kumbh Mela where Mahavatar Babaji initiated Lahiri Mahasaya's disciple Sri Yukteswar Giri into sannyas. He looked at him and called him Swami. That was his initiation. It was at Kumbh Mela where Yogananda ji also met Mahavatar Babaji for the first time. Swamiji himself, in the recorded satsang we watched yesterday, he said that the reason Kumbh Mela happens so perfectly, without any typical, ordinary kind of planning, without the kind of planning that would go into developing a city, or hosting an awards show, or throwing a wedding feast, throwing some banquet, without any of that kind of ordinary planning, the whole thing just beautifully comes together. Because he said it's Mahavatar Babaji who organizes the whole event. I've actually heard stories from disciples within our Sangha, within Nithyananda Sangha, talk about meeting Babaji at the Kumbh Mela. There's one beautiful story, one lady, before going to Kumbh Mela with Swamiji, he asked the crowd, does anybody have any requests? Does anybody want some special boon? He said he'd give it. She raised her hand and said, Swamiji, I want to see Mahavatar Babaji. And he immediately blessed her with a tatastu, said, you will see Mahavatar Baba. And sure enough, one day, not only she, at least 10 of the other people around her also, they all saw Babaji. And apparently the experience was so strong, some of them heard a ringing in their ears for days afterward. It was so powerful, it threw her into a samadhi state. She didn't come down from that state for a while. She had to have somebody help her to walk. Because that ecstasy of seeing him, that vibrational frequency he's carrying, the deathless body that he's in is so strong. So during the last Kumbh Mela, when I was there in Nasik and Trimbakeshwar. We were there with, of course, the huge group, but a small part of us within that group were out making a documentary. Sri Nithya Medananda Maharaj, Ma Nithya Shantananda Swami. The three of us especially, the two of them and me, every day we were going out collecting footage, finding different happenings, seeing different sadhus. Sometimes we'd have a different videographer with us with a video camera. We were just constantly going out exploring, filming, on the spot scripting. One day while we were out, we were in this town of Nashik. I was seeing all the different Vaishnava Akhadas. The last Kumbh Mela was split. Shaivaita Akhadas were in Trimbakeshwar, near the Jyotirlinga temple. The Vaishnava Akhadas were in Nashik. And they were near the Kalaram temple, a temple built on the spot where Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana themselves had lived during the time of Rama's exile. So we were in Nashik, we were near the Kalarama temple. One of my Facebook friends sent me a message saying he's the Sri Mahant of that temple. He invited us there, so we were there to meet him. And I was looking at just groups and groups of sadhus. It was such a beautiful sight to be seen. Just tents with meditating yogis, the whole expanse. I had a sudden flashback to the way that I had felt when I first read Autobiography of a Yogi. When I read that section about Kumbh Mela, I felt so much joy, such giddiness that existence had actually brought me there. And inwardly I said, Babaji, you used to answer my prayers. You're the one who led me to Swamiji. I'll always be grateful to you for that. I haven't spoken to you much lately because, of course, all my prayers now go straight to Swamiji himself. But I said, if you can still hear me, I want your darshan. I want to see you. And I immediately heard an inner voice say, you won't see me, but you'll see one of my other close disciples. So I started greedily scanning the crowd. Oh my God, I'm going to see one of Babaji's close disciples. It didn't actually happen the way I had expected. I didn't see anybody at that moment who immediately stood out as a disciple of Mahavatar Baba. But the next morning, the very next morning, there was an announcement made in the Nithyananda camp that Vishwananda was going to be there. Paramahamsa Shri Shri Vishwananda, Swami Vishwananda. And a lot of you must know, his entire life story is interlaced with visits from Mahavatar Babaji. He is one of Babaji's closest disciples. Just as Babaji gave Swamiji the name Paramahamsa Nithyananda, he gave him the name Swami Vishwananda. I was watching the stage, seeing Swamiji and Swami Vishwananda sitting right next to each other, and I got hit with a wave of realization. Exactly what that inner voice had said had come true. I wasn't seeing Babaji, but I was seeing two who were connected with Babaji together on one stage, Swamiji and Vishwananda. And as soon as that session had ended, the morning had ended, we were actually given an opportunity, those of us working on the documentary, to go backstage to interview Swami Vishwananda. And as soon as I was looking at him, I could actually see for just a brief second, Babaji was also there. When we're at Kumbh Mela, the space for these mystical happenings is so high. The darshan is there in every direction that we look. Now, when I'm sitting at Swamiji's feet, at the feet of Paramahamsa Sri Nithyananda, there's no words to describe it. The power that he radiates is so intense. Part of the reason I naturally stopped praying to Babaji, asking Babaji for guidance, it's because when I sit in front of Swamiji, I feel such a tremendous power emanating from him, such a tremendous energy. I know he is the source. He is the destination, he's the origin, he's the everything. There's no need to look elsewhere. So please understand this desire to see Babaji. It wasn't like I was seeking something more than what Swamiji has to give. Swamiji is everything. No doubt, there's nothing beyond Swamiji. It was mainly just a spiritual desire, like a small curiosity. Actually, Swamiji said once, having a darshan of a deity, having a darshan in a dream, all of these kinds of things that we ask for as seekers, he said it's like getting a piece of spiritual candy. It's something to enjoy. In that sort of a way, I was asking to see Babaji. But I got to hear Vishwananda's stories about his early childhood with Babaji in person from this close. I'll see if I can retrieve that footage. It must be somewhere in the archives. I was meaning to put it up as a YouTube video, but so many other projects have happened since there hasn't really been time for anything like that. But in any case, when we're at the Kumbh Mela, this is the beautiful thing about Kumbh Mela. If you're somewhere in the world, no matter where you are, if you pray to see some enlightened master, if you have a desire to see Babaji, if you have a desire to see Swamiji, if you have a desire to see one of the Acharya Mahamandaleshwars from one of the Akhadas, if you have a desire to see Naga Sadhus, or the Aghori Sampradaya, or Matajis who are walking with their long jatas, if you have a desire to see any of these beings, the only way you can see them is if you do a Google search and look at their pictures online. Maybe if you're extremely blessed, you'll have a vision, or you'll have a dream darshan. But when you're at the Kumbh Mela, if you have that prayer to see one of these elevated beings, you can just open your eyes, look to the right, and they'll be there. Turn your head to the left, they'll be there. Look behind you, they'll be there. Look up, and etherically, they'll be even there. The Kumbh Mela is the place where all the gods and goddesses, all the enlightened beings in body and out of body, and materializing bodies, all of them are together in the same place at the same time for the same reason. All you have to do is be there, and you'll be rubbing shoulders with the spiritual elite. We all know that in the movie industry, the Academy Awards, the Oscars, that's the time when all the big movie stars, all the producers, all the top singers, songwriters, all the famous people from the outer materialistic world, they'll all be there in the same place at the same time. You can go and stand with the paparazzi and catch a glimpse of all of them walking the red carpet. But if you try to walk onto that red carpet, security will be pulling you away and beating you. What good are you going to get anyway from touching some celebrity on a red carpet at the Oscars? It's not going to transfer anything good. It's not going to benefit your life. It's not going to take you into a higher state. Forget that. Even on a worldly level, touching a famous person is not going to make you famous. But at the Kumbh Mela, the red carpet is Mother Nature. The red carpet itself is the festival path where you dance in the procession to the Shahi Snan. The masters are right there. The deities are right there. No security is going to pull you away. You will be touching all of them. When you're immersed in the same water that's touching all of those masters' bodies, it's the equivalent of you physically touching those masters directly. And we all know when you touch the physical embodiment of enlightenment, the enlightened master's touch, it does something to you. If you touch an ordinary person, the best case scenario is that you'll pick up a couple of their patterns. You'll pick up some unwanted karma. But when you touch an enlightened being, the transfer of energy that takes place is on a different frequency altogether. That's why it's revealed in all of the scriptures that it's only through the touch of an enlightened being that we become initiated into the realization of enlightenment. That when you have that physical touch, that darshan, it awakens the dormant potential within you to realize your highest possibility. At the Kumbh Mela, it's literally a who's who of all the great divine beings who are here available to humanity on planet Earth. The reason we get so excited when Kumbh Mela is coming up is that we know the grandeur that takes place at the Kumbh Mela, whether you can see it through the physical eyes or through the third eye or perceive it through the intuition. In whatever way that you're able to tune in and see it, it's the greatest happening you're ever going to witness. The greatest scene ever to be seen. So if you have the desire to have any master's darshan, Swamiji actually said this once also, one of the other discourses he gave in Prayag, in Allahabad Kumbh Mela. I don't like to say Allahabad because that's a name given by the invaders. I prefer to say Prayag. I'm sure you all know which place I'm talking about. In one of the discourses in Prayag, Swamiji said so perfectly, every single enlightened master alive now, and every single enlightened master who has ever lived, they're all there at Kumbh Mela physically. When Kumbh Mela happens, they will be physically there. Now, there was a big group of devotees last time in our tent. I missed this particular scene because I was out interviewing some Mahamandaleshwar for the documentary. I was out conducting an interview, so I missed it. But during one of the bandaras, one of Swamiji's disciples who was there serving the sadhus, he was actually on the cleanup crew. Male bodies were serving, female bodies were cleaning up. Swamiji said this time everybody will be serving. Females won't have to do the cleanup, they can do the serving. But at that time we had heard one rumor that women are not supposed to serve sadhus. Now that's been cleared, it won't happen next time. In any case, she was on the cleanup duty, picking up the leftover banana leaves after all the sadhus had eaten. And she suddenly had this overwhelming urge. She had to see Babaji. And she said she even vocalized the prayer out loud. She actually said, Babaji, I want to see you. And she said at that moment, she turned her head while cleaning up these banana leaves. And she said she saw one sadhu with about shoulder-length black hair. She said it was just past his shoulders. She said he looked younger than the rest. He looked like a youth. He had beautiful glowing skin. She said his hair had almost an auburny black hue. And he was staring at her laughing. And she said as soon as she saw him laughing at her, as soon as she saw his face, she knew, my God, that's the face in the artistic illustration in Autobiography of a Yogi. She said she went into such an ecstasy, such a trance. She was still dancing, still twirling a few hours later when we came back from the footage we were taking, from collecting that footage. Right there in Swamiji's camp, humbly sitting on the floor, eating the bandara feast from a banana leaf, she's absolutely sure she saw Babaji. And I believe her. That kind of ecstasy she was expressing doesn't happen for nothing. And at Kumbh Mela, you can also have that same kind of a darshan. Any master, whether it's Yogananda, whether it's Ramana Maharishi, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Swami Vivekananda, Adi Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, if there's any enlightened being, any master whose story you've read, any of them, you can just come to Kumbh Mela with the right seeking in your heart, with the right prayer in your lips, and you'll have that darshan. The same way any deity, any Ishta Devata, you want to have a solid experience with. I'm not giving the guarantee, I'm just repeating back what Swamiji himself has said. We know his word is truth. All of the gods and goddesses will be physically available to you there. You can see them. So don't miss this opportunity. If you're still on the fence, if you're still wavering, should I, shouldn't I, take this as a clear message to you, you should come. Don't miss Kumbh Mela in Ujjain. It will be the time, not only the time of your life, it will be the time of all lifetimes. So before I read a passage from the Jivan Mukti Grantha, I'd like to answer about this coffee. And I've had some messages come up in Facebook, on YouTube, and even in the YouTube Living Advaita Facebook page. People are asking, why do I cough so much? Basically, there's no spiritual state that makes it so that a person no longer catches a cough and a cold. I want to tell you guys a little something. I was raised in a family of teachers. My Purvashram family, almost everybody in that family was a teacher. And I remember whenever some teacher would be transferred from one school to another school, there would be about maybe 3 or 4 months of solid getting colds, from one cold to another cold to another cold. And I asked my Purvashram mother why she was catching so many colds, because normally she's a completely healthy person. And she said, no, it's been scientifically shown when a person moves to a new germ pool, they'll catch all of those colds. It's medically proven a human body can only catch one cold virus once. It never catches the same cold virus again. So people who live in the same community from birth, probably after the age of 20, they won't catch a cold again unless somebody else moves in close to them bringing some new germs. But when a person moves their body to a new germ pool, a new environment, they haven't caught those illnesses yet, so they haven't built up the antibodies. They're not immune to it. The body will catch it. Even enlightened masters get sick. Even enlightened masters catch colds. I'm not saying I am one. I'm saying if even they catch a cold, don't expect me to be beyond catching a cold. Somebody was asking almost in a cruel tone of voice, if you claim to have all these spiritual powers, why do you cough? First of all, I don't claim, I know it. Swamiji has immense spiritual powers. He's transferred some of those powers to me. I have seen them expressed. I'm not claiming anything. I'm just stating a fact. I have seen through my third eye on multiple occasions. I've declared things and seen them manifest through Swamiji's grace many times. Don't try to connect two unrelated things in an effort to disprove one or the other. That would be like saying to a person who has mastered mathematics, but who has a fear of public speaking, if you're really so smart, why can't you stand in front of this group and talk? They might be a genius with mathematics, but they're still mastering that ability to speak publicly. The same way it would be like asking somebody who's a beautiful dancer, maybe somebody can dance like nothing, do the splits in midair, twirl, do a backflip, strike all the different poses of Bharatanatyam with perfect rhythm to the music. Maybe somebody is a perfect dancer, but hasn't yet developed a singing voice. Would it be fair to say to that person, if you claim to be a good artist, why can't you sing? The same way, Swamiji has initiated a lot of us into a lot of powers. I've successfully done the 21 days of Nirahara, going without food, going on just liquid. He's given me a lot of graces. I've never asked him, maybe this is something I should do. I've never specifically asked Swamiji, make it so that my body doesn't catch a cough and cold anymore. I'm sure if he had initiated me into that, I wouldn't be coughing like this. But don't think that because I'm coughing, that negates everything else that I've said. The same way, don't think that anything you see any of Swamiji's sannyasis do. We're still on the path of perfecting ourselves. We're still on the path of realizing enlightenment. We're not masters yet. If we were masters already, Swamiji would have made that announcement to the world. We're here, following our path of dharma. We're here surrendering to Him. We're here following the daily routine. We're doing everything we can do to realize the highest possible spiritual state. And I know with 100% certainty He is bringing us into oneness with the ultimate. But along the way, don't expect us to be perfect in the way you think perfection is going to express. I'm not saying accept limitation, accept fault, accept our frailty, accept our weakness. We're not frail, weak, faulty people. We're sincere seekers on the path. But just simply understand that as we're merging into that perfection, we're still going to be human. This body is still a human body. Until that final realization happens, and even then, there's no such thing as final. Enlightenment itself is constant expansion, constant elevation, moving to the next and the next and the next and the next phase. There's not going to be one day when that's it and we sit back and relax. There's only going to be one day where that's it and we take even triple the responsibility we've taken so far. But in any case, don't think that one person coughing means that Swamiji hasn't actually given the graces and the powers that He's given. Don't judge His ability as a master based on what you perceive as a weakness within a disciple. We are all here to raise ourselves to His Anyakara. We're not here because we're already our final full potential. We're working towards it. So if any of you have been wondering, There's one person in particular on almost every episode of Living Advaita. She's left that same comment in YouTube. How can you claim this when you're coughing like that? How can you claim this when you're coughing like that? Are you ill? Is something wrong? In kind of an accusational tone of voice. Drop your judgment. The other thing is, if you look at your own life and see things that are going wrong with you, if you're also judging yourself, I'm sure you are. Nobody judges somebody else without first judging themselves. This pattern could also be holding you back from your enlightenment. If every time you take a step forward, when one little teensy thing goes wrong, if you suddenly think, darn, I've missed it all, I'm a failure, if this is still happening, how can I believe that that actually happened? If you're constantly judging your progress based on these nitpicky little details, you're going to feel like a failure. Don't do that. Keep striving. Keep pursuing the ultimate. Keep moving towards your realization. Keep moving towards the fulfillment of your full potential. Don't stop to judge somebody else. Don't stop to judge yourself. Just keep moving. Swamiji always tells us again and again and again, don't overthink. Less thought, more action. Do what you need to do. Don't judge somebody else's process. And trust that if there was something seriously wrong with me, if I had some kind of a serious illness, do you think I'd be sitting here day after day after day hacking into the microphone? Maybe maximum once or twice in an episode I'll cough. And anyhow, it's also healing. You might notice the cough has reduced over the last couple of days. Whatever cold this is, it's worked its way through the system. Now it's almost finished. The cough is almost over. It's not a big deal. We don't have to make something small into a big deal. So let go of that judgment and just enjoy the path. So on that note, I'll conclude this episode. It's one of the last days for this because we're almost at the 1-month anniversary point since Jivan Mukti Jayanti. So before moving on to the next book, let's really savor these last couple of days of receiving a message from Swamiji himself through the energized deity that is the Living Enlightenment book. We'll see what Swamiji has to tell us today. The message Swamiji says today is this: when you are trusting and surrendering, it becomes difficult to cheat you. Innocent trust always protects from deceit. It radiates that kind of energy in our ashram. People from all walks of life come together to live. Once they enter the ashram, they develop a sense of deep trust. The very decision to take the jump from the material world to the spiritual world of an ashramite comes from trust. Further, when they enter the ashram and start living, sharing their things with other seekers, there is such trust that no one cares to keep anything under lock and key. The room may be filled with strangers, but still there is no thought to keep one's possessions locked. Nothing gets lost. Even if something cannot be found, the very attitude is such that it doesn't matter to them anymore. That is the beauty of it. What a sweet message today about being unattached to physical possessions with that deep trust that whatever happens is perfect. Of course, now instead of ashram, we'll say adinam, and instead of ashramite, we'll say adinavasi. Maybe this is a specific message to you if you're somebody who is considered sannyas, who is considered coming to stay here and become a part of Swamiji's family, Timali. Swamiji is extending that invitation. Maybe it's time you jump on that. For now, thank you for tuning in. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions in the Living Advaita Facebook page, and we'll see you again next time. Nithyanandam. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudashyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sarvam Satguru Padukar Panamastu. Om Nithyanandam.